Hi everyone, it's Sinead Willihan here today with you on February 6th, 2021. I'm so used to saying 2020. And we're here on Grant Cameron's channel. Grant is here with us today. He's going to be part of a panel of people that are going to be speaking to us about their visions of oneness, their visions of the grand consciousness. That is really the focus of our talk today. It's going to be less like an interview, much more like a discussion. I'm here to facilitate. Grant is going to be sharing his experience, as are two lovely people that we have with us today, Debz and Hollis Polk. Both of them are psychics and channelers. They're also experiencers. They have had visions of oneness and they wanted to be able to share those with us today. So welcome everyone. Welcome Debz and Hollis and Grant. Thanks so much for being here to have this discussion.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Glad to be here.
Thank you so much. So just to get us started, we were thinking that we could talk about why we feel like it's important to share this experience of oneness publicly, why people can benefit from hearing about this. And Hollis, I'm going to go to you first. What is the reason why you think this is an important topic?
Well, there are a couple of reasons. One of them is on a personal level, and one of them is a more global level. So in order to adequately explain either of these, I think I have to go back and tell what happened to me. So my experience was in like the mid 80s, and I'd only been meditating for a few years. I'd started doing psychic training. But before that, I was literally raised to be an atheist. So I had no preconceived notions. Nobody had ever talked to me about much of anything. And I was, raised to be really scientific, right? I was a complete NASA geek as a kid, which eventually led to an engineering degree from Princeton. So I'm this techie person, and somebody kind of teaches me to meditate. Although actually I kind of backed my way into it accidentally when I was in college, but I didn't even know it was meditation. So anyway, it's the mid 80s and I'm meditating, pretty much every day for maybe 10 minutes a day. And a friend of mine lends me a meditation tape. She's like, yeah, you might enjoy this. Fine. And back then tapes were on cassettes. All recordings, it's not like today. Back then they were on cassettes. And I had this little, portable cassette player. So I lay down on my bed and listened to the meditation tape. Now, the tape was probably, something between 30 and 40 minutes, but it was an hour-long tape. Literally, things didn't just end. They went on. If you didn't turn off the tape, they just went on until the tape ended. And so what happened, it was a man, and his voice stopped. And when his voice stopped, there was just white noise. And somehow I flipped into a place where it was just white. There was nothing physical. It was like this luminous white space. The closest I can come to it, and this isn't exactly it, is if you are in a plane and you're coming up through a dense cloud into the sunlight, and you're right about to come out into the sun, and there's all this light there. So it's bright light, bright white, there's nothing. And I kind of freaked out, but I couldn't leave. And then I realized, literally, there was no me. There was just this white space. And then I realized I was having a thought. So now me, with no physical representation at all, was having a thought. That meant I was still conscious. That meant there were other conscious beings there, which I could sort of sense in the distance, but I couldn't actually hear anybody else's thought. And I stayed there for a while, kind of wondering, okay, what do I do now? Where am I? What is this? What do I do now? And literally knowing I'm one with everything. And after, probably 20 minutes of this, and the only reason I know that is because the tape ended, and the cassette tape machine clicked off. And that brought me out of it, like instantly, like I'm back in the physical world. Well, again, I had no background in this. So I didn't know it was possible that, I mean, again, this was the 80s. People were not talking about out of bodies much. They were not talking about near-death experiences. Like this stuff wasn't commonplace back then. And now I'd had this experience where I was one with everything. And I was kind of freaked out because I didn't know it was possible. I mean, think about it. I had actually read some of the Bible as background for literature courses I was taking, because, you know, back then Bible references were common, you know, from like 1700s, 1800s, 1900s, Bible references were common in literature, and you had to read the Bible in order to make sense of what they were talking about in the novel. So I'd read some of the Bible, and the Bible always talked about God as a he. And so so there's literally no point of reference. Like if I'd met some being, I would have thought, oh, that Bible stuff is true. But it wasn't that. It was just this unity consciousness. And like I said, I actually was so freaked out that I couldn't even meditate for a month before I could kind of like process the experience and go back to meditating. So again, there are two reasons for doing this. The first one is, okay, let me move forward again. It was 30 years before I met the second person who had had that experience. Literally 30 years, like almost to the month. He was a like junior high friend of my husband's, and he and his wife and my husband and I were all having dinner together, and he happened to bring this up. And I was like, oh my God, like how exciting. I'm not alone anymore, right? Somebody else had this experience. Unfortunately, he declined to be part of this panel, but then about 8 months later, I went to a lecture at the Foundation for Mind Being Research of a pretty well-known physicist, like one of the original Intel people. And in the course of his lecture, like towards the end, it was almost like a throwaway. He mentioned having the same experience. And I was like, oh my God. So I went up to him after the lecture and I said, so since you talk about this, how many people have told you they've had the same experience? And he gets this funny look and goes, oh, I don't tell people. That's weird. He told us, there were probably, 75 or 100 people in the room. He told us. And then it was another, I don't know, the next person who told me was Debz. And I won't steal her thunder. And since then, I've met one more person. And now today, I guess we're going to hear Grant's story too. But like, there's no reason to feel alone. That's number one. And then the larger reason is, if we're literally all one, like most people, when you say we're all one, it's a kind of kumbaya, like let's feel good thing. And I'm telling you, no, it's real. We're literally all one. So what you do to somebody else or what you do to the environment, you are in fact doing to yourself. And people need to get that on a deeper level. And I'm kind of hoping that by us all talking about this, more people will be aware that it's possible. And then maybe they'll have the experience too. And the more that people have the experience of unity consciousness, the more people will be aware, like, oh, we're doing this not only to ourselves, like everything we're doing to ourselves, which should, one hopes improve the world. So.
Thank you, Hollis. Thank you. That's beautifully said. And I personally very much agree with you. There's a difference between saying that we understand oneness and actually understanding it. It causes us to move through life in a totally different way. So Debz or Grant, would you like to speak to what Hollis just said? Feel free to jump in. Debz, anything?
Yeah, I mean, I was kind of shocked when I don't even know how it came up between Hollis and I in a conversation. And then when we both realized we had this incredible experience it literally is, you hear this term all the time, life-changing, life-altering. It alters you down to the genetic code in your body. It really does. And when I realized my friend had the same experience, but many years before me, um, it was comforting, but it was also shocking, because when you have this experience, we're talking about an experience of oneness, and yet you feel like you're the only person who understands it when you've had it, because it's so deeply personal. And it's like your friend Hollis that said, well, or the person that you went to listen to the lecture, well, I don't tell anybody. It's not like, ooh, no, you're not supposed to tell someone. It's just, it does not occur to you to talk about it. But now it feels imperative that we talk about it. So that's just my thoughts about what she said.
Thanks, Debs. Would you like to just take the opportunity now to explain your own experience of what your vision of oneness is like, and just share that with the audience? Then that'll give them a sense of where you're coming from.
Sure. Well, my experience was, I've led a different life than most people. One side is, I'm right in half. One side's like super normal, do well in school, get a corporate job, work yourself up the ladder, all of that stuff. And the other side is very spiritual, because I came in with all the side gifts on. And so without going into the length of the story, it just suffice to say that I started meditating very early in life, formally at age 13, and became a yogi at that time, and all of that stuff. And it helped me to understand why I was perceiving the world in the way I was, when other people weren't reflecting that back to me. I would talk about my experiences, living multidimensionally. I didn't have the language for that, but trying to talk about it, and people just thought I was either really imaginative or didn't want to hear it or whatever, right? So, but once I started meditating and practicing yoga and all the things that go with that, studying energy, eventually these conversations came up, these schools started opening where you could actually, quantify or qualify the experience with scientific rhetoric or research. Then it started to make more sense. But the meditation practices always led me to deep places. And I grew up in the hippie years too. So, everybody else is seeking God, if you will, or seeking whatever, with, psychedelics and all kinds of things. And I experimented very shortly with that, but I didn't ever come up with the same depth of experience that I did with the meditation. So I came along my life with meditation. So my practice is really, really deep, and it's powerful, and it's consistent, to the point where it's necessary for me to function in life, to do this practice every day. And so I have great experiences. I've studied a lot. I've talked to people a lot. It's my work as a therapist and a psychic person, to talk to people about their experiences. And I hear about them a lot, but I continue to deepen my practice. So one day, not long ago, and this was just, what was it, Hollis? This was like maybe a month or less, maybe month and a half ago.
Yeah.
I decided to do something different in my practice. My practice it takes quite a bit of time. I get up really early in the morning in the dark and do my practice. And, it's deepened to such a point, and I'm sorry, I'm having trouble making it come into words, but it's deepened to such a point where I literally have super HD psychedelic experiences as part of my meditation practice, just from the practice, nothing else. And I see living geometric forms. They're conscious. I've always had light beings, energy beings, whatever, ETs confer with me. We're friends. I have all these phenomenal experiences that would make great movies if I could just get them out of my head and onto film. And then it kind of it comes up to a crescendo where it's really, really vibrant and amazing and you don't want to leave. And then it just kind of starts to taper off and you start to come back into your human reality again. And that's how my practice is. But today, for one reason or another, this particular day, I decided when it comes down and there's no more input, I'm going to sit there for a little bit longer. I'm going to make my human personality, my body, sit there for a little bit longer, even if there's nothing happening, just the stillness, because I love the stillness too. And I actually had time to do it. So I did, after having all these great experiences, like journeying everywhere, all these dimensions and seeing these forms and meeting these beings, getting information. And then it was just kind of, kind of blackness with kind of, I don't even want to say a white noise. There's just nothing, the nothingness. So it was very soothing. And I sat there and slowly I started seeing little pinpoints of light. And I realized it looked exactly like it looks when I'm stargazing. It was like outer space. And it became more clear like it, almost like the background you see behind me. And I thought, wow, it's starting up again. And I didn't do anything to do that. Usually to get everything going, I do special pranayamas, breath work, and all of that stuff before my meditation. Didn't do anything. And it's starting up again. So, oh, cool. I'll sit here and see what happens. Well, it was beautiful. And I felt very, at that point, you are no thing. You do not have a body, like what Hollis is saying. You don't have a body. You're really not a mind. You're no thing. And yet you are observing. And it's this amazing feeling in and of itself to be that immense and that connected. But it wasn't coherent to me that I was, part of everything. Although I teach that every single day, talk about it all day long. So I'm in this space, I'm watching it just quietly, and yet I know I am no thing. And then there's kind of almost like a constellation or a cluster, star cluster starts to form in front of me, very, very diffuse, very light, but it's white. And it's coming toward me. And I'm just observing and it's coming toward me, no feelings, nothing. It's coming toward me and getting bigger and more diffuse, but brighter. And I've had 2 NDEs. I've seen the light, if you will. I've seen people welcome me in, and then we decide it's not time to stay. So I come back and it feels great. It feels like you are loved by everything and that you found home, you know where home is. But this was different. This white kind of moving, morphing cloud of light started coming in, and I felt it wrap itself around me and not just wrap itself around me, merge with me. And it was the most love I've ever felt. It was the most peace I've ever felt. And it was suddenly the realization that I don't have a term for it. The closest term I have, I've read about, research where they talk about getting 360-degree vision. You see everything all at once, even, directionally, but dimensionally. I saw everything. I knew everything. I understood everything. And yet I was not getting excited about it. I was not emotionally attached to it. I was just like, oh yes, this is who I am. And this is who we are. And I saw people, people just started coming in, and I saw them for who they were, which was exactly what I was at that moment. And that we were all part of that cloud, and that there was so much love there. It was like being at the top of, it was like being as zoomed out as you can be in your perspective of what life is, and seeing it clearly without it all breaking up. And it stayed in focus. Again, words don't fit this, but so it was this wonderful realization, just like Hollis said, no matter what I do, no matter where my perspective is, no matter what I'm thinking about, doing, feeling, it's affecting all of this, which is me. These are just different facets of the same jewel. And again, I teach this every day, but to have the direct experience of it is completely remarkable. And it was so beautiful. And I expressed gratitude. All I could feel was this flood of love and gratitude coming from me, like, oh, thank you. I finally reached what I was striving for in understanding of this unity consciousness or oneness concept. And then it kind of took a more personal form. I felt the love. I felt like there was a being wrapping its arms around me and holding me and affirming what I was feeling. And I could perceive a communication. And I said thank you to the being, to whomever it was personifying as. I said thank you, and this is incredible, and I'm so grateful. And the voice in my head, if you will, wasn't a voice, it was telepathic, said, you're welcome. This is how I experienced it for the first time. And I wanted to give it to you. I wanted to share it with you. And I said, well, thank you. Thank you so much. And who are you? And this blew my mind because I had not thought of this person. I adore the person, but when they were human in their incarnation, but hadn't thought about them for a long time. And the voice said, when I was in the body, a human incarnation, you knew me as Edgar Mitchell, the astronaut and scientist. And it kind of took me back for a minute, and I said, oh, thank you. And then my next question was, why me? And he said, well, why not you? My job now is to share this with others, just like it was shared with me. And you're resonant with the way it's being shared. And that's why I'm here. If you were resonant with experience in another way, someone else would have tapped you in, I guess, is how it kind of felt. But I was extremely grateful. I was humbled to pieces. But he said, this is exactly what I felt when I felt it in space. And it changed my life so much. It changed my way of thinking so much that I had to completely alter what I did in life from that point on. And he did. I know he did. I mean, he quit being an astronaut. He started the Noetics organization and so forth, and began the study of unity consciousness. So that was interesting and thrilling and all of that. But to know, it gave me some sort of a relative node, someone else who I have heard say had this experience. I finally got to feel it almost through their eyes, and then it was my eyes, and I realized it's all of our eyes. And he said, now it's your turn to take it back and give it to other people. Almost like I could see him passing like the Olympic torch to me. And, not like you're the only one who can do this. Everyone's having this experience in their own way because we're all one.
So let me jump in on that. So why, I mean, as you're saying, as you as Hollis and Grant and, anybody who's had this experience is saying that it's very, very difficult to put this into words. You cannot really put it into words. It's something that you just have to experience. But at the same time, Hollis came to me with the idea to do this discussion because she and all of us feel that it's very important to talk about oneness, not just as a theory, as a kind of lovely, floaty, happy, love and light kind of thing, but as a real thing that is really out there that can help us evolve and progress as human beings, right? So yes. If you want to put a finer point on that, what do you think, why do you feel personally that it's so important that we communicate these experiences to other people in a particular way so that it has real, it really lands in the minds of the people who hear it and helps them integrate this as much as possible into their own lives? Why is that important?
Well, personally, for me, from my perspective, it's extremely important right now because we all live in such a divisive society. we have become so addicted to labeling and qualifying everything and judging everything to the nth degree that our societies are crumbling right before our very eyes, because everyone is judging each other so much for their differences that they do not understand that we are all connected, and that it goes everywhere from oh, I don't really like the color of that person's hair, why doesn't she do something different, to I strongly believe that you are evil and I'm going to do everything in my power in this life to shut you down. And when you start judging along within that spectrum at all, it causes more and more division. And it's almost like cell division. We just keep dividing until the human race is turned into something completely different and we've lost our way. It's time for us to realize that everything we think and do and see and feel affects everything else in our lives, especially the beings in our lives, the people. We can't continue to judge and hate people because we're just judging and hating ourselves. They're just reflections of different aspects of ourselves. I think that's why it's so important. It is important to let people know that this is a reality, that it can be experienced. And now I'm probably going to spend the rest of my life trying to figure out how to lead people into this experience, because you cannot speak it in words. You have to have the direct experience before it's relatable to your life. But it gave me a purpose and I can't let it go. And it is with me always. This experience does not leave the person once you have it. It informs every single thing I do. So if it's affected me that way, it can affect other people that way. And that would be my hope.
Thank you, Debz. And I think this is the perfect opportunity for Grant to jump in. He has strong feelings as well about, how easy it is for humans to go towards separateness when we also have this equal opportunity to go towards oneness. It is a choice, but our conditioning and all of the context of this dimension that we live in, the way our society and culture is structured, we're very conditioned to go towards separateness. So Grant, I would love to hear you speak about your take on this. I know you've done it lots of times before, but I'll never get tired of it. And I don't think your audience will either. I also know that you keep having new, depths of understanding and new insights into your own experience. So please feel free to take it from here.
I think they said everything. There's nothing left to say. No. As to personal experience, I'll tell you how it sort of happened for me. It starts with the UFO sighting. So I start with no interest in UFOs, no interest in extraterrestrials, no interest in anything. And I do all the research and I'm the document guy and I'm, chasing the president and all this kind of stuff. And then I have this shift in 2012. So I move from sort of rational, analytical, trying to figure out what's going on. How does this thing work? How does propulsion work? All that kind of stuff. And I have the first experience was the consciousness experience. But I think where the oneness thing started was 2017. So I'm into the consciousness thing, and I realize that definitely I've been told that the answer I wanted in 1975. So in 75, I saw the object. First night, second night, I saw it, and then I'm looking at it and I'm going, what's it doing? It didn't seem to be doing anything. And I tried to get a book published. Nobody wanted to publish it. And so what happened was that I said, all I want to know is what's going on. Somebody's got to know what that thing is that I saw. And when I got the sort of the noetic experience in 2012 in Phoenix about the consciousness thing, that's when I sort of started moving down that road and move sort of towards, I guess, away from the physical towards the spiritual stuff. But it's in 2017, I think, where the oneness thing sort of starts is I'm walking down a street and I knew that you could get sort of in the field. You could use, meditation, whatever you're using. I could never do the meditation thing. It never seemed to work for me. It was okay, but I never got anything out of it. And I would use this thing where I would walk. So I'd be walking from my place to downtown Winnipeg, which is about 6 miles, which takes quite a while. And it was cold. It was sort of late fall. and I'm walking along, and that's when I have the more dramatic noetic experience where suddenly it comes. And if for people who've had noetic experiences, start writing this. You got to write this down. And it's coming into my head, and it's giving me these 24 things. And one of them was the oneness thing. It said, I'll give you a couple others just to set the tone. So it says, is the world one life? If it's one life, then that's one world with certain rules. But if it's multiple lives, everything changes. All the rules change. And then it would say, is the world made out of little nuts and bolts? That's one world, and it has certain rules. But if it's not, if it's made out of consciousness, which makes nuts and bolts, that's a whole different world. All the rules are going to change. Everything's going to change. And it was basically saying, not only have you got it wrong, because I was trying to figure it out, not only have you got it wrong, but it's exactly the opposite of what you think it is. The one that had to do with oneness is, it said, is everything separate? Because, with the Darwinian random evolution idea, it's random, it's all just happening by accident, all this kind of stuff. So it says, if it's chance, if it's just, happening by accident, that's one thing. But if it's pattern, that's a whole different world. And then it was the idea of separation. So it said, if everything is separate, if everything is just sort of objects floating around in space, banging into each other randomly, that's one world. But if everything's connected, if everything's one, that's a whole different world. And it was the difference between separation and oneness. So that was when the idea sort of first came up. And then because I was doing the download thing, I started looking at all these people who were having downloads, and I got into the music thing. I did the connection between musicians and UFOs, and this oneness thing kept coming up. It come up and came up. John Lennon has a famous song about the oneness, and a lot of them had done the psychedelic stuff. You find this in the psychedelic where, like Sting talks about his ayahuasca experience. He said, I suddenly realized everything, my ego was crushed, and I realized everything was alive and conscious, and everything was connected. So I started to realize there was this connection. I think the main thing that sort of triggered it for me, that I guess made the bell go off, because a lot of mine is sort of like the rational. I'm trying to look at it in terms of science, in terms of rational, how this thing works. And it was the whole experiment, the quantum physics stuff, that now everybody's into the quantum physics stuff. But back then, there's not many UFO people talking about the quantum physics stuff. And it was the experiment about the spooky action at a distance. There's this idea that David Bohm and people have talked about where you have one particle going at the speed of light in this direction, this one, and you change the spin of the one, and the other one can be on the other side of the galaxy, and it will instantaneously change. And it was like, whoa. It's like, and one of the explanations was the concept that it's like a giant bell. That everything is connected. Everything's like a bell. So when you change, or say, if you ring the corner of this bell, the whole bell will vibrate, not just the one corner, and everything's connected. So it was this idea that there's no time and space. Either there's no time and space, or that this is all connected. And that's why the particle can be on the other side of the galaxy and it can shift. And that sort of shifted me. It's like, oh, it is all one. This whole thing, it's this vibration idea. And then as I went along, I wrote the book called Contact Modalities. And again, it was like you see all these download experiences, and people would talk about this oneness. And before I started the UFO thing, I had no interest in UFOs or extraterrestrials, but I was interested in Edgar Cayce. And I'd actually gone to the institute, the ARE, where his files are kept and stuff. And it was one of the most fascinating. He's a young kid there, and taking books out of the library. There's a massive library, and sit there and read these books on the ocean side and stuff like that. And Edgar Cayce had actually said, when I was doing the research, I realized that he had said the same thing. And he died in 1943 or something. So this is long before everybody got into this, oneness talk and stuff like that. He said oneness should be the rule for the first 6 weeks. Oneness of this, oneness of that, oneness. Kept this oneness. I go, oh, even Edgar Cayce talked about this. And as I'd go through, I'd start to realize that everybody was talking about this oneness thing. And so, like, for example, Bashar, the famous channeler, he's got there's only 4 rules to the universe. And one of them is the one is the all are the one. And so I was like, oh, there's that oneness thing again. And then you'd get stuff like the guy who wrote the book, The Children of the Greys. He's on board the ship, and he's he's angry at the Greys. He doesn't like being there. He said, I would have broken their neck if they had let me loose and stuff like that. And he's talking to the tall gray, and he says to the tall gray, okay, so what's your concept of God? And he said, the tall gray said, we are one with the one who is all. And he said, I was so blown away by what this guy had said. I had to sit down. I had to sit down on this little bench. I just couldn't believe what he'd said. And so I started to see this. And then you start looking at the channeled material, Seth, the Law of One, the Book of Miracles, all these things. And it's like the oneness. Everybody's talking about the oneness. And I came to the conclusion, and this is where I'm sort of at now, is I say that is the only rule, is one. That is the message of the aliens. That's why they're here. It's all the theory of wow. They are not doing anything. They are just putting across one message, that you are about to destroy the planet because you believe in separation. You believe you're divided. It's me versus you, this country versus that country, this political party against this political party. And they're basically saying, unless you get it together, it's over. You have to realize that everything is connected. Everything is one. And it made sense, this thing about the bell, that when we detonated the hydrogen bomb in Trinity in 1945, the bell rang and everybody in the universe knew what had happened. And that was something that we could never conceive of, because we think, oh, what I do doesn't affect anything else. If I detonate an atomic bomb, it only affects this 2 square mile area. The Canadians were saying already back in the 1950s, the guy who ran the Canadian program, he said, no, it vibrates through the earth and all this kind of stuff, that it has a bigger effect than what we think. So when we detonated the bomb, that's when they came. And the message that they have is this idea of oneness. So the way I sort of sum it up is I have this expression, like they always ask, what's my favorite quote? And my favorite quote is, everything that we believe to be evil in the modern world is based upon one thing and one thing only, the mistaken belief in separation. And everything that is good is based upon the belief in oneness. And I absolutely believe that is true. That if you really honestly believe that we are all one and we are all together, you're not going to cut off your own arm. You're not going to do this kind of stuff. Now, I'll just say one more thing, that the oneness experience I have had, as you know, I did a hands-on study of psilocybin, high dose psilocybin. I've now done 17 sessions. The first book is about to be published in a couple of weeks. It's called Breakthrough. And the breakthrough is the idea of what everybody in psychedelics wants. You want the breakthrough experience. You want to pop into nirvana, samadhi, whatever the experience is, this state of total bliss where you're one with the universe or whatever. And you need to do like 4 or 5 grams in order to break out. And what you're doing is you are destroying the ego. And you know that we had a psychedelic group, and one of the girls talked to me one time. She said, "Oh, I had a real bad experience," and that was before I'd actually tried it. And I said, "Oh, you had a bad experience? Like, what happened?" And you remember she said, "Oh, they made me watch myself die, and I actually died. I watched myself die, and then I watched my body rot." And I'm going, "You did?" It's like, wow. And that's what that's the whole thing about the high dose. Why people don't want to do high dose is because the ego is saying, no, you ain't getting rid of me. I'm the whole thing. I'm the separation. It's the ego that believes it's separate. And if you look at Jill Bolte Taylor, who I talk about all the time, she's a neuroanatomist from Harvard University who has her left brain shut down, and the ego is in the default mode network. It's in the left brain. And she said when the left brain started to shut down, she had a left brain hemorrhage at 38 years old. The blood starts flowing into her left brain, and she's going offline, coming online, and she's off. She's in the right brain. Their left brain is shut down, and she's in nirvana. She's in one with the universe and stuff like that. And all of a sudden, the left brain comes back online. And it says, "You're in trouble. You better do something. We're in trouble here. You better do something." And then she'd go back on the other side, and she'd go, "Oh, this is so cool. How many neuroanatomists can actually watch themselves having a stroke?" And then left brain comes on, "Phone somebody, you're in trouble, do something." And it was this idea that and she said, when this ego was shut down, she had no voice in the head. And she said there was absolutely no fear. It did not exist until about 7 weeks later, after she had the operation, and the left brain started coming back online, and suddenly the fear was back, and this separation idea that I'm separate from everybody else, she clearly defined it. So what I saw was this continual story of people. And that's what happens in high dose psychedelics, is that your left brain basically it's shut off. The ego is shut off. And that's why people don't want to do it, because the ego is saying, no, don't do that. I don't want to die. Don't do that. Why don't you just do a microdose? Just do a little microdose. That'll work. Because that'll be good. I can think better. I can do this and I can do that and I'll feel better and stuff like that. And it doesn't want to die. And I've been through 3 sessions where it was literally hell. It was, there's no other description for it. It was, you're separate. You're pleading to be let out. And that's the ego. They're shutting the ego down. And it can be a very horrendous experience, which flashes me back to 1976. People always ask me, they said, did you ever have an experience where you thought you'd been abducted? Because I had a lot of sightings in 75, 76. There was a small town. All this stuff was flying around. We used to chase it. It was going so slow, you could actually chase with a car. And I said, the one thing happened. And I think if I was ever taken, that's when I was taken. And this situation happened where there's these, what we call ground lights. Now they call them orbs on the ground. We're flashing lights and they're responding to us and stuff like that. I had these kids with me. And all of a sudden the thing starts doing this beeping, whistling noise. And instantaneously, there was absolute terror, almost like the situation that you get in a psilocybin experience when it shuts your ego down, when it kills the ego. And it was just terrifying. And I for all these years, I've always wondered what was with that. It just instantaneously, it was the scariest moment of my life. And as I said, we've been chasing this. It was a great time. And it completely shifted and it was coming. And this object was on the horizon and it was coming around. And it came and it sat right on top of the car. It was up above the car. It was a huge triangle with these lights on it. It was sitting there. And I remember it was like it blinked or it shifted just the slightest little bit like that. It shifted almost like it blinked and boom, the fear went away, like gone. And I've even come to the theory now. This is the article I wanted to write this morning. I was sitting in the parking lot at McDonald's and I said, you got to write this article. And it was the whole idea of why did the beings come to you in the middle of the night? And they come to you, they come and they go, Grant, wake up. Come on, wake up, Grant, wake up. Why do they do this? Nobody ever thinks about it. It's like, come on, wake up. And then you look and you go, oh my God, there's an alien in my room. And then the alien goes, no, there's 2 of us. Hey, can you see this guy too? And it's like, are you really scared? And and to me, it's like, I think they're doing the same thing. They're shutting down the ego. They're making you dissociate. They're moving you into the field. And then they go, boop, top you on the head and you pass out and they take you on board the ship. Why do they wake you up before you take you on the ship? And you start making this idea that it's all this thing about the separation. The ego believes in separation. It believes me versus you, good versus bad, all this duality type of stuff. But when you get in the field, when the beings are interacting with you, they interact with you in the field, not with your ego. Because people say, well, why don't they come to the door? They came to the door, knocked on the door and said, well, we'd like to take you for a trip on our little flying saucer. And could you help us out with this medical thing? I would say, yeah, I would do that. And it's like, no, you wouldn't. Because the ego is still intact. You would have 99% of people would freak out, look for the gun and shoot you. And so that's the whole idea is this ego thing. And the more I look at it, and I think about this 24 hours a day, the more I look at it, I believe that is absolutely the only message that they have. And it's the idea that you are not alone, that there's this other thing, but it is part of you. And they will always give the message. The beings will always talk about this oneness. The free survey, the Edgar Mitchell was brought up earlier. The Edgar Mitchell free survey showed that 54% of all experiencers say during their experience, they were talked to about oneness and love. Now, that's not something you're going to make up because you think they're going to tell you about star systems and how the flying saucer flies. Why would they talk to you about oneness and love? And that was what motivated me. Now, I've had a couple of sessions where I get through what I call the turbulence, this killing of the ego, which can be very, 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 very scary. And they wipe your memory every time. It's almost like I was writing about yesterday, Sherry Wilde talking about the beings, and she's talking to Da, the being. Why do you do this all the time? You're pretty scary. Why don't you come as a human being? Why do you come as this gray thing? And he said, well, the body is very functional. We can have whatever body we want. Well, you scare me every time. You wipe my memory. And then, so you wipe my memory and I forget what you look like. And then when you come, you scared the living daylights out of me again. And that's what happens in this, I found in this, the psychedelic thing, I found the same thing is, why do I keep forgetting? Every time I think it's actually for real. And it's a situation where you're so scared, where you're in this situation, you're out of control, you're separated from everything, and you absolutely believe you are in hell and you are going to be there forever. And then all of a sudden it pops out, and then you go into the field. So once you get through that, they kill the ego, then you're in the field. And then I've had this experience of oneness, but it's not a thing where it's like they're holding a sign and saying this is oneness. You feel this state of euphoria, this state of bliss, this state of samadhi. And so my whole thing is, bottom line is, that is the only message. That is the only thing. And unless we get the idea of oneness together, the world is done. It is finished. You are not going to save it as long as we believe that we are better than everybody else and it's somebody else's fault. We are going, and that's the warning they're giving us. You've got to get this together, almost like the Ronald Reagan thing. And the rumor was that Ronald Reagan actually had a direct encounter with a being. Shirley MacLaine told us that she had been told by Lucille Ball, the comedian, that Lucille Ball was at this party where Reagan came in. He'd had this sighting. And she said that Reagan actually had a being sighting. It wasn't just a thing. The thing landed, he interacted with the being. And if you remember Ronald Reagan's famous alien invasion remark, he said it about 7 times and they had to try to keep shutting him down from talking about it. He said how the world would unite if we were faced with a threat from an alien race. We would all realize we're just God's children. That's the oneness message. And Reagan had it, even though he had the little twist. And that's what he wanted to do, is he wanted to shut down nuclear weapons. That was his big thing. So it's the whole idea of we are all one, and it may sound very woo-woo or whatever, but it is a critical point that unless we understand that we are all on this boat together, and that whatever you do to Gaia, you do to the universe. And unless we get that idea, I believe that's what the aliens are telling us, that we are done. Even the Canadians, I'll end with this. The Canadians had a contact with a being by the name of Afa. And Afa was talking to the head Canadian guy. And the message he was given is, we will not step in. We will, the only time we will ever step in to interfere with the human race is if the world decides it's going to have a nuclear exchange. We will step in and we will stop it. And that's the idea. They really don't care so much about us, because if you die, you're going to come back on another planet. That really doesn't matter, but you're not going to destroy the planet. So they said, we will stop it. And to prove that we can stop it, we can take the moon in front of the entire world, split it in half, and put it back together in front of the entire world to show you that we can stop a nuclear exchange. Other than that, said Afa, we will allow the human race to stew in its own juices. So it's up to us. They can't do our homework for us. They are trying to indirectly give us this message of oneness. And if we get it, we survive. If we don't get it, if we still believe in separation, me versus you, good versus bad, we're done. And I absolutely maintain that is what the message is from the beings, or the intelligence behind the phenomenon. I really don't know if there's beings. It's intelligence. It masquerades as whatever it's masquerading as, but it's all one. Because if again you look at the aliens, people say, oh, it's aliens, it's angels. No, it's one thing. And they've said numerous times to numerous experiencers, we can come as whatever we want to come as. And if you're in fear, you're going to see a gray. And if you're in a state of love and bliss, you're going to see an energy being. And we are part of what we're manifesting. It's all one thing. So even the idea of separation, that there's these aliens and those aliens and stuff, it's all one thing.
Thank you, Grant. Beautifully expressed as always. And I really appreciate how you draw in all these examples, that people can relate to from history and from all the work and knowledge that you've accumulated to really heighten people's understanding of what this is really about. I really, really appreciate that. And so I want to put a question out, jumping off of what you've just said. I want to put a question out to all 3 of you. This relates to at least one thing that all 3 of you have mentioned during this discussion. There is a theme here, which is underneath the theme of oneness. And what I'm hearing is the theme is essentially accountability, right? That we have to take responsibility. We have to hold ourselves accountable as beings on this planet, and the fact that we not only affect ourselves, as Hollis was saying, what we do to others, we do to ourselves, and we also do to others, right? We can hurt or harm others, animals, people, the planet, whatever it is. So here's my question for you. What does it take what form of accountability should we be taking? What does that look like in order for us to really make use of this understanding of oneness, or for people who have not had the oneness experience, their understanding as much as they can understand it? How can we make use of this knowledge, of this understanding, and apply it in an accountable way to help ourselves, to help others, to help the planet? What is the key within that theme of accountability? What does that look like to the three of you?
I can start, I guess, because nobody else is saying anything. I say the basic idea is, because I'm a big Michael Newton fan, life between lives, the whole idea that when you come into the world, you plan to do something. If it's multiple lives, that's what I was told in 2017. If it's one life, it's one thing. If it's multiple lives, it's another thing. If it's multiple lives, then we probably came in here and said, oh, when I get to Earth, I'm going to do this, and I'm going to do this, and I'm going to do this, and I'm going to do this. And we forget who we actually are. As Shakespeare said, who I hated when I was in high school, all the world's a stage, all the men and women and aliens are but actors. They have their entrances and they have their exits, and each man plays many roles. We have to remember who we actually are, that we are one with all. And when we have the realization of the fact that we are not the actor on the stage, that we are the voice, we are the observer of the actor on the stage, and realize who we are actually are, then we get into a situation where we only do what we are supposed to be doing. We realize I came into the world to be something, to do something. And when I leave, they're going to ask you one question and one question only. How did it work out? Because you planned it. You put the players on the stage. And all we have to do is worry about, what am I supposed to do? What did I come here to do, and do it? I think we maybe spend too much time worrying about other people, trying to convert other people instead of working on ourselves. That if we do the right thing by example, people will come to understand that maybe that's the right way to do it. Or you just put out your story. You put out your story, and it's almost like what is it? People who have ears to hear, let them hear. You know, the biblical expression. Or when you can't make people change people who are set in their ways, that when the time is right, those people will understand. Everything happens. Or you and I did the lecture with the people who believed everything was perfect, that everything is exactly the way it's supposed to be, which is another hard concept for people to say. And we had a near-death experience. We had the guy who was in the float tank, and we had that girl from Edmonton who was just reading a book, who's the regressionist. And so it's this whole idea that everything is working, and we can only take care of ourselves. We can only do what we're supposed to do. And we have to realize who we are, and we can't forget it. We keep forgetting it because we go back into the ego. The ego takes back over and says, okay, now we get back to work here, and we need some more stuff here. And, gather, rape, pillage, kill, and steal. Whoever's got the most toys when the die wins. We go back into that world, and we keep forgetting who we actually are. So the bottom line is, we have to remember who we actually are and why we may have come here. And then we'll do what is right based upon that.
Thank you, Grant. I'm just going to hop on that and say that, of course, how do we remember who we are? There are so many opportunities to do that. I mean, Debz talked about her meditation practice. You've talked about psilocybin. Hollis also has a meditation practice. She has a walking practice she does every morning. We all have things, there's so many opportunities to learn, to explore, whether it's just checking out different religions or different spiritual practices. The whole point is seeking to get back to who we are. So there are lots and lots of opportunities out there
but I think we have to remember that there are some people who are not in this lifetime. That is not their goal.
Yes.
To understand this thing. Or almost like Max Planck said, science advances one funeral at a time. And I think knowledge advances the same way, that we have to have empathy and understanding for whoever it is we've got a problem with, because if we don't, next time around, we're coming back, whether it's the kid in the cage or whether it's the, problem with gays or blacks or whatever. Get ready. You don't have empathy and understanding. You're going to put yourself in a position to come back, that we have to realize that everybody's on their own path. Yes. And that we have to stay away from trying to recruit people. You put your story out, and the people who are ready to hear it will hear it.
Thank you. And so Hollis and Debz, I'm just going to bring the question to you as well that I put to Grant earlier. What does this accountability look like? If we're supposed to be doing our part while we're in this lifetime to for lack of a better phrase, be the best that we can be so that we can benefit ourselves, other people, the planet, and grow and progress, become more connected with oneness and consciousness. What does that accountability look like? What are we supposed to actually do? Do you agree with Grant? Do you have more to add? Do you think it's something else? Please feel free to take it away.
I completely agree with Grant, and he said it way better than I could. What I will say is that in the last few years, it has really come to me, you know, especially because things in the US have gotten so divisive in the last few years. It has come to me basically to look at somebody whose behavior I cannot fathom, right? To say, what would it be like to be living inside that?
Mhm.
Which is the development of compassion. And, you know, I may or may not figure it out. There's plenty of people. I mean, but at least I'm asking the question, and that is the best thing I know in terms of accountability to, you know, being a good person, being one with all. Like if I'm really one with it, with all, and I know that I am, then there is some path where I can understand, where I can forgive, where I can, you know, allow. And in some sense, yes, everything is the way it's meant to be. And yes, karma, when you know, what you put out comes back to you, makes perfect sense if you are allowing for multiple lifetimes.
Mhm.
And, you know, somebody, I heard, the guy's name is Stephen A. Schwartz. I heard him on an FMBR YouTube the other day. Best YouTube, I mean, no offense, Grant, best YouTube I've maybe ever heard, who said, consciousness is primary and time space comes out of that. There's no, to me, no better summary. And if you think about that, then aligning with consciousness is the best thing you can do.
Mhm.
Thank you.
Right.
Debz, would you like to speak to that? Oh, sorry, you're starting already. Please go ahead.
Sure. No, I didn't mean to interrupt, but I agree with both of you, all of you, actually. Grant said it very succinctly in that we all come in here with a purpose, and some of us remain conscious or remember our purpose along the way and start to take hold of that. And I've always had the general purpose of helping humanity move forward into a more positive place ever since I was a child. But this experience continues to grow and morph within me, and it galvanized me as to what my purpose was. And my purpose isn't as a lifetime rabid activist, let me just say, on many fronts. I am now, I would say, also an enthusiast for quantum science. I'm a quantum activist. What I do affects everything else. So why not come at it from the bullseye, which is me? Okay, so not selfishly, not disregarding the rest of the life just to focus on me, but focusing on the experiment, if you will. This life is my big science experiment, and that is to see how I affect life around me by what I do, think, say, and feel and experience. And so that is my purpose. And to put myself out there as a teacher, as someone who can listen, as someone who can share information if asked. Otherwise, I do it passively by going into my own consciousness, which is the consciousness of, I love your metaphor, Grant, the bell. If you ring the bell here, it's going to vibrate everywhere. So let me ring the bell. Let me be in here in a state of conscious, balanced self-awareness and love. And let me be the transmitter of that in everything I do. Do I get pulled out of that? Sure, 1,000 times a day, because I have all this input and I get, distracted. But the more I focus on this, the more I feel this state inside myself, the more I'm aligned with it. And I don't get pulled out of it as much. And when I'm aligned with it, I'm transmitting it. You cannot help that. That's, again, a quantum, it's just a law of the universe. When you're absolutely focused on something, that's what your reality is. So short of going up to the Himalayas and sitting in a cave, like my guru said I did for way too long ago anyway, and I got bored with it and came out to do this, short of doing that, it's a walking meditation. And I think it's phenomenal. The three of us, yes, I sit in meditation and I do all this yoga and I do all these practices, but my favorite thing short of meditation to do is to walk. It used to be run. For 50 years, I was a runner. Now it's walk. And when I walk, and it's 3 to 6 to 8 miles a day, depending on what I'm doing, that's where everything comes into what we call Sushumna, the tube that goes straight up through you into infinity, connects with the big brain, and you have access. And that's why, you know, Grant, you take notes. I do voice recording because I actually can't write it down fast enough. And the information comes, and that what I call the stream of universal consciousness starts to download. So I think that's kind of interesting. I never realized that correlation between the three of us, that we walk every day. And so, but yeah, to hold the world accountable is not my job. To hold myself accountable, so the world will be accountable via the transmission of the vibration of the bell that I'm ringing is my job. And I think that's, you know, that's the big takeaway for me. I cannot, you know, I've had lifelong, almost daily contact with ETs, with interdimensionals, with every kind of consciousness you can imagine. And it's been wonderful and shocking and freaky and all of this. And at the bottom of all of it is the recognition of the self within each of those interactions. There's always some sort of commonality, or we wouldn't be interacting with each other. And that's the experience that I need to take out into the world. That's my purpose. Take it out in the world and ring the bell in such a way that that other person's heart chimes a little bit and we become more coherent. So I'm probably babbling like a mad woman, but that's it. Can't use the words right.
Let me add one thing that I think we also have to recognize the fact that we are one with everything, because we go into separation, we go into ego, and we say, this is terrible. Why am I in this? They got these people, and there's this and there's that. And we have to realize, as I say, I came into this world at this time, at this place, in the middle of this huge mess. And perhaps I came for a reason. In Michael Newton, which I was one of the things that absolutely blew me away when I saw this guy lecture live, has this idea that there's no good and bad. There's just experience. It's what is happening to you. And the ego will do the separation. I'm a victim. I'm separate. Why are these people doing this? Why do I have to live here? Why is it 40 below in Winnipeg today? Oh, poor me. The ego is having a trip. And I just got a new expression someone did. And it's like, would you like some cheese and crackers with that wine? Because that's what we're doing. We're whining away. And you take a look at especially the UFO community. If you take a look at the UFO community, it is really into fear. It's into victim stuff. It has really gone south in terms of where it should be. And there is this element of people who understand the oneness of the spiritual aspect, and the UFO community is fighting it off. But I see it as all opportunity. It's hard to keep that. It's because the ego always wants to take back control, but to keep in mind that we came here and it's all experience, and it's not what cards are dealt to you. It's how you deal your cards. And we have to do what most people are trying to do, is they're trying to change the dealer. Just play the cards that you are dealt the best you can, and realize that there is purpose in the end. As I have, and the thing that amazed me most, I end with this. The thing that amazes me most about these high dose experiences is at the very end, near the end of it, I have absolute gratitude, like you cannot believe. And I'm thinking to myself, how do they do this? I mean, if you can package this and sell it, it's just, there's no words to describe it. And it happens every single time. It just blows me away. This gratitude that I'm alive, that I'm here, that it's all going to work out perfect. And that's because the ego was shut down at that point. It's off. And then once you come back on, by the next morning, after I have a session, by the next morning, I'm back in the dumps, and, I'm regretting some of the stuff that I put on Facebook the night before and stuff like that. And the ego starts to grab a hold. So remember who you are, and remember everything is experience. And we put it in, especially if you take responsibility, that I may have put this thing, that I had a near-death experience because I intended to have a near-death experience. I'm not a victim. I had this experience and that experience, and I put those in. I put the stones in my path for a reason. Take personal responsibility, because until you take personal responsibility, it's game over. You're never going to learn until you take personal responsibility for what is happening to you in this world.
Yeah.
I want to go off that. I want to.
Oh no,
Okay,
I'm just really relating to that. I mean, I so agree with the three of you in terms of the personal accountability part, and also integrity, right? Because it's so incredibly important that people are not just using words to talk about oneness and what that means and the importance of it, but that they're actually walking that understanding through their life, that their actions are showing that they actually understand it. Because if we really do understand it, that understanding, as Debz was talking about, becomes integrated with everything that we do, with how we interact with others, how we interact with animals, with the planet, how we treat ourselves. It becomes truly integrated. And so other people see that. They see if somebody really understands oneness or consciousness, and this bigger goal that we have for our planet, for ourselves, and the human race collectively. People see that if somebody really does get that, if someone's really walking through their life with integrity, with accountability, with responsibility for who they are inside that understanding. If there's a clear difference between that and somebody who talks about it, love and light and all this kind of stuff, but then spreads fear or intimidation to other people, does not actually represent those values. And I think that's really important to say, because of, it's jumping onto, I guess, what Grant was just saying about what's happened to the ufology community. It really has gone into a great deal of fear, conflict, people telling each other, you're wrong and I'm right. This is the right way to look at it. That's the wrong way to look at it. It's very kind of combative in some areas of the community. But fortunately, there are still a lot of us who are having these discussions and who are kind of more interested in the bigger picture, right? And in being together and in not getting involved in all this really useless, pointless division and conflict. There's no reason for it. It is not necessary, and it's not the purpose of why we're here. So I love hearing all three of you say that. And Hollis, you were just going to speak to something as well. I'm sorry I cut you off there. Please go ahead.
No, it's fine. Well, two things. The first one is going back to us all, the three of us all walking and meditating while we walk. I want to add that, we're not just one with other humans. We're one with the animals. We're one with the plants. We're one with the rocks. And when I walk, that is my intention, is to be, I don't even have to have the intention. I just be. And, plants talk to me and say, come look at me. And, rock, I'll be honest, I have intentionally tried to merge with cars, and I can't do it. Anyway,
merge with the metal in the car.
I've tried that too, and it seems like it's too processed. It just won't. Anyway, fence posts I'm good with, but anyway, the other thing is I'm a huge fan of Seth. Yeah, and this is part of the accountability piece. Seth's, if there was one takeaway from Seth, and there was a lot of good stuff, you create your reality through your beliefs. And most people leave off that through your beliefs part, which makes it airy-fairy BS. But if you include through your beliefs are something you can manage, you can change, you can figure out where they are not working for you. And so everybody who's going into victimhood can change the belief about it's being done to me, rather than, no, I agreed to this, I'm choosing this. What belief is it that attracted this to me? And that's another way of accountability.
Right. And beliefs are just a thought you keep thinking. That's all it is. A belief has no power other than that. And, you know, the more you think about it, the more galvanized you become in that belief system until you decide to think something else, a new thought. But that's it. And I agree with you on that. It's amazing. I know that, you know, we get as ET experience or contact experiencers, I'm sure all four of us have had that experience where we have been given that message. Like Grant said, if you don't take hold of the reins and do, you know, act with self-responsibility and accountability, it's game over here. You know, you're destroying yourselves. You have before, you will again, if you don't, you know, if that's what you choose to do. But at the bottom or the top of that message, what I get because of the oneness is it's all okay. It's always all okay. That's the main message I get, because it served purpose for learning experience. You know, and when you all gather back to the oneness source, or at least a cluster of that, and you review, like, well, we kind of screwed that up. Let's try it again, or let's try something new. We've gotten enough out of that. But everything is perfect in each moment for that moment of experience and learning. So I don't ever want to get into a place of doom and gloom. I have been there for many years as an activist, especially about nuclear power and the lack of ecological responsibility and things like that. But at the bottom of everything, I know it's all okay. This is just, as you said, Grant, as Shakespeare said, this is all play. This is a psychodrama for us to all work our stuff out in, right? And I think what I want to end with is that it doesn't matter what belief system we come at it from or we're in when it hits us. Like you said, Hollis, you were raised atheist. I was raised strict Catholic. You know, we're all coming from different places. No matter where you came from in your belief system, eventually you will come again into the experience of oneness. And one of my favorite stories about the Dalai Lama was someone asked him, you know, we know you believe in a higher power, divine source, God, whatever, and that's how you live your life, and that's how the monks live their life, and that's how we should all be living. What about the people who don't believe? And what about the people who are really seemingly evil and live life selfishly and from the ego and hurt the people and the planet and maybe the cosmos by their actions? And he got quiet for a second, and then he smiled, and then he giggled, and he said, well, when they die, they'll have a very big surprise, a very happy surprise. And I think that's what it is. You know, some people get the surprise while they're still walking around in this human space suit, and some don't see it until they leave the spacesuit in the physical realm when they die from the body. But we always go back to it, and we get a taste. And then if we decide we want to have some more experience, we come back and do this, or we do that, or whatever it is. But it's always all okay. And when I see people who are in a state of victimhood, it tells me that it's a reflection. There's something in me, you know, I'm resonant with it, or I wouldn't be seeing it. What am I feeling that makes me afraid, or that makes me feel like I've been put upon, or whatever? I go into that self-inquiry, and at the bottom of it, I have to remember it's all okay. I chose that experience or that circumstance so that I would have a greater understanding via my response or reaction to it. So it's all okay. Grant sees a bell, I see a sphere. You tap the sphere somewhere, it rings everywhere. It's still a bell, but it's all one thing. It's connected on all, there's no ending to the sphere, right? There's no beginning or no ending point. You tap it here, it's still going to ring over here and here and here, and all points in non-local reality, which is what we exist in. So that's it for me.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. I see it as dropping a pebble in a pond, you know, that old metaphor of the ripple effect, right? You drop the pebble in the pond and the ripple goes out and out and out and out, no matter where the pebble was dropped, and that ripple is going to touch all the shores of that pond, right? So it just keeps going out and out and out. Whatever we do, whatever action we choose, whatever choice we make, whatever karma we create, it sends out that endless effect, not just for us, but out into the universe as well.
And when it touches the shore, it bounces back. So it starts then re-affecting everything that is, it never ends. It goes and comes and comes and comes.
Yes.
So.
Yes.
And you won't see those effects when you're in this, physical suit. So you got to allow for that, let that be, and have the positive intention and then let it be.
Well, it comes down to trust with a capital T, right? You have to trust that it's all okay. You might not see the whole puzzle. You're looking at a pixel on the part of the picture that is on your piece of the puzzle. So that's it.
Yeah, a lot of it definitely has to do with surrender. I mean, Grant was kind of talking about that when he was speaking about his psilocybin experiences, that you really have to be willing to surrender. You have to let your ego die. You have to allow your ego to step out of the way, and just trust that, there is a much bigger picture that we can connect to that is giving us what we need, either in a so-called negative form or in a positive form. They both have a purpose. And the 3D is all about duality. Everything in the 3D is dualistic. It is the way that it is. So it's important for us to keep working towards this goal of oneness, of consciousness, of advancing ourselves, while also recognizing that we live in this dimension where it's really hard to do that, because there's all these other things that pull us away from that, right? Pull us away from, as Grant was saying, who we truly are, our true nature. So that's where the accountability and the responsibility comes in. And I'm really grateful for all of you for being here today. This is a really wonderful discussion. I just want to put it out there. Does anyone have any last comments or insights, or a story they might want to share before we finish today?
Okay, I'll give you one. As you know, I did the music, and the oneness thing came out. So I'll quote from Stairway to Heaven by Led Zeppelin. And this was written by automatic writing. If you heard the story, he starts doing the lyrics in automatic writing, and here's what it says. And if you listen very hard, the tune will come to you at last. When all is one and one is all, that's what it is.
Yeah.
Love it. Beautiful note to end our discussion on. Unless Hollis has anything she wants to say. Hollis? No?
Nope,
Okay. And
I'm
Debz,
good.
all right.
I'm complete.
Okay. Beautiful. This was such a wonderful discussion. I feel energized. I feel heartened. I feel connected to this concept that we've all practiced. And so I'm grateful for all of you being here. And Hollis, thank you for bringing this forth so that we can have the opportunity to do this today. And Grant, for as always, allowing me to do this wonderful work with you and put it up on your channel for the benefit of your audience, hopefully, if they're gelling with what we're saying today. So thanks everybody for listening, and that's it for today. We're going to close up and say goodbye. It is February 6th, 2021, and it's a brand new year. Let's make it a wonderful one, and let's practice oneness. Let's practice higher forms of consciousness with each other for the benefit of ourselves, for others, for planets, not just our own, for the universe as a whole, for our star beings, our star family, the animals who rely on us to be kind and compassionate to them as we take over a lot of their space, and Earth herself. So good night, everyone. Good afternoon. Good morning.
I got one more thing.
Words, as Grant usually says.
You inspired me. I have to do one more thing.
Yes.
You talked about 2021. And I've thought about this recently. We're always sort of blaming the year, like 2020 was a bad year, like 2020 was, and so I would say we have to live in the here and the now, present moment. So let's all go for a walk.
Yeah,
That's what I'm about to do.
Me too.
Great. Yeah, actually, all four of us are walking meditators. I do it as well, and I like to walk for hours. It is incredibly wonderful. A great way to get into the zone.
Thanks.
Yes.
Wonderful.
Thank you.
Namaste.
Namaste.
Bye.
Love y'all.
Thanks, everybody.
Bye. Love you too.